So hopefully the camera is keeping focus. If not, we do have multiple cameras, so you have an angle from here again. If you're wondering why my voice is so quiet, it's because I'm a bit ill, but hopefully you guys can hear me, because I have a microphone stand, which is that weird thing up at the top that I'm not going to remove in post at all. So yeah. Hey guys, it's me, the Afro again. Yeah, again, sorry for my bad voice. I'm a little bit ill. Of course, I've got my tools out, which likely means, or definitely means, that we're going to be doing some building again. But just as an FYI, if you haven't seen the amateur console modding series from when I made this Game Boy, which I hope you can hear because that sounds pretty good, or if you haven't seen the episode where I made the her custom Game Boy Advance, which also turns on still, which I'm very proud of. Both of these I'm insanely proud of. If you haven't seen the videos on these, make sure that you check the playlist that I've now made for amateur console modding. That's where you'll find both of these videos. They're, I think, around about 20 minutes, half an hour long, so they're quite nice to watch if maybe you just want something either on in the background or if you want to learn a bit more about modding consoles. But today I'm doing something very different. So normally what I tend to do with my console work, or at least with the last two, is get consoles that work and then just kind of make them better. So with both of those, it was putting them into metal housings, giving them a backlit screen, and making it so they're rechargeable. Whereas with the Game Gear, this is actually quite different. This is like my first project because this doesn't work properly. So my first job is to fix it. Hopefully I can fix it. If I can't fix it, I'm going to be very upset. But to see exactly what's wrong with it, I've got some batteries in it. I already know where the battery door is. And yes, if you're out there, I know I'm using like mismatched batteries, and that's not necessarily good. I've actually got some more Eneloops on order, and they should be arriving today. So that way I can have them all being the same. Leave me alone. Okay, so I'm going to put this next to the microphone so you can hear it, because it is making sound, but it's just not very good. There you go. Right. Hopefully you heard that. The sound is very low. The screen is doing some weird things with lines, and that happens regardless of whether I change the like contrast. What I'm hoping is the issue with the lines on the screen is that it's just that it isn't getting enough power, or that the capacitors aren't working, which is something that's, at least from my research, meant to be very common with the Game Gears. If that's the case, then it should just be a case of replacing capacitors, which I've ordered. These ones were ordered from Mauser Electronics, which is a pretty cool website. I quite like it. I get the stuff from the US and they arrive from wherever they are. So these might actually solve the problem. I'm hoping that by replacing the capacitors on the audio board, it will also get louder as well. And hopefully if I get it all working, then maybe I can eventually get to a point where I start modding this Game Gear after repairing it. That was a burp because of illness, and that means I likely have to have more medicine. But let's get started on actually repairing it. So I'm going to get this open and we'll see what happens from there. Okay, so now to open the Game Gear. Now, from guides that I've seen, you want to make sure that you're opening it that way, because there's cables that are meant to exist that go here. So let's see. There we go. Well, I got all the screws out. One just didn't come out properly. Sweet. So there we go. Right. And we're in. So this is the Game Gear inside. I'll show you that real quick. So from my guess, compared to like other consoles, this I assume is the main board, and then that, because that has the power switch next to it, that must be the power board, which is why it has these beefy ones, these beefy sort of like capacitors here. And then this, I'm assuming, because it has the volume wheel on it, must be the audio board. And then this must be a little cartridge guard to stop the cartridge from touching anything like these things that it's not meant to. So let's get this disconnected. These cables look like they should just pull off, so we'll try just pulling them off straight up. Yeah, that looks about right. Yeah, that doesn't have a cable, so that pin is meant to be missing. And similar there. There we go. So if you're wondering what I mean by there's pins missing, if I show you here, I'm not sure how well you can see it because I'm not looking, but there's a pin missing here and there's a pin missing here, but those pins are also missing on the cables that are in the Game Gear. So it looks as in there's no cable, sorry, going to that little junction there. So where there's a pin missing, there's also no cable that it has to connect into. So that one kind of makes a bit of sense. But what we're going to look at first, because it is the quickest board to look at very least, it only has, from the looks of it, 3 capacitors, is we're going to have a look at the power board. It's also the board that I know actually works. So as long as the power board works afterwards, I'm going to know that it turns on and off, and then we should be good to go. So it doesn't look like anything's stopping it from coming off. So let's try and just unscrew it and see if it comes off. Okay, so if it doesn't want to come up, then there's something stopping it. Maybe this guard here is stopping it. Let's try taking this off. It looks like it's just stuck to the top. There we go. Yeah, it was that. So I'm guessing this is meant to stop the battery terminals from short circuiting against anything. So I'm gonna leave that bit of the case just laying on top of the Game Gear. That should be safe. So this looks like a power board. If anything, the reason I can tell is that it has the power switch on it, which slots onto the front. The switch looks okay. The power jack, the connectors to the power jack look fine. And admittedly, the capacitors look okay, but it is still worth replacing them just to make sure, because these look like the originals. So it looks like it's going to be relatively old, especially taking into account how hard it was to take the little battery terminal cover off. This is likely going to need some replacement at some point or another, so I might as well do it now. So let's get the fire torch and we're going to take it off. Before we get the fire torch on, safety goggles. We gotta make sure that we're safe before we use fire. .35V 2.2, 3522, which is, well, it's going to be the smallest one, so it's going to be this one. Now it's time to solder on the new big capacitor. There we go, and those are some good solder joints right there. So the way you can tell that it's good, if you can see it, if it focuses, focus, there we go, is you can kind of see like it's really shiny and round where I've put the new joints in. That's basically where you know that your joints are really good. Now I'm gonna get some flush cutters later and cut those off, but for now I'd much rather leave the leads there while I try and get this component off, which I shall try and then cut to when I've actually done it. To give you an update, firstly, my voice is sounding a little bit better, which is good, but secondly, I've already soldered everything onto the power board, and I've taken all of the components off of the audio board, so now I'm just putting some new ones on. Now I normally would try to put some surface mounted capacitors on to replace the surface mounted ones, but because the pads are so small and it just seems like they are very specific sized capacitors, I'm instead going to replace them with these audio grade normal ones and then just like bend the pins so then that way they sit as if they were actually the surface mount ones. So that should pretty much work exactly the same way. I made sure to still get them to have the same capacitance and voltage measurements and situations, so they're the same capacitors, they're just a bit different, and I'm kind of just going to have to cheese making them service mounted versions. So what I've done is basically used some needle nose pliers to make the legs for them, and then I'm just going to cut the legs off so that I have shorter capacitors, and that should then do me well to fit onto there. So I've done it pretty much perfectly, which is good. So then I've got my electric torch instead because I needed to have something a little bit finer to use, and I'm just going to put solder onto the pads first, and then basically I'm going to heat up the pad while I'm putting the component on, and that should then solve it. I do however have some surface mounted versions of the bigger ones that are on the audio board, so I'm going to try those and see if I can get those to fit, and then if I can, then it's brilliant, and then if not, then I've tried, and then I'll just go back to using the standard ones and just cheating. There we go, and that's stuck down, so I'm just gonna put some more solder onto the legs just to make sure that they stay down properly. There we go, so that looks good. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other capacitor of the same type. And then I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning around my little workstation, and then most importantly putting stuff back in and testing it once everything's actually put together. Okay, there we go. So it looks like I've been able to get all of the capacitors onto the audio board, which is pretty good because some of them were really fiddly. But let's do some cleaning. So first thing we're going to need to do is cut off the edges from here. That otherwise looks all good. Right, so we're going to put the power board back in, and we're going to put the audio board back in. I'm going to put the power board back in with the power switch attached. That would be a very good idea. That looks correct. There we go. And then we're going to put the sound board, the audio board back in. Right. And then we'll actually screw those in because we're done with those for now. At least they both have had their capacitors replaced. And we're going to see if... Now I'm expecting from at least this stage of the repair, I'm not expecting much of a difference. Maybe the audio will be louder, maybe. I'm at least wanting the audio to work, which would be pretty brilliant, because I didn't really have that much of an easy time with it, to be honest with you. So I want the audio to work. If it does work, then I want it to be louder. If it doesn't work, then I'm gonna have to figure out why. See, because I forgot to connect something. I think I forgot to connect something, because the sound isn't working, but also, yeah, I think if I haven't connected something, the sound might not work anyway. And I know that everything is all connected up well. Aha. So the reason your sound might not work if you do this is me fiddling with it, because I've realized that I've unplugged it the wrong way. But I didn't connect the speaker in. Now that is a lot louder, so that's good. At least audio seems to work a lot better. The main reason it might not have worked is maybe if I haven't put some shielding on or something like that. So originally the Game Gear would turn on, but I wouldn't get anything in terms of sound output. The sound was really quiet. The volume of the sound overall wasn't good. There's nothing on the screen. We still haven't got anything on the screen, so we still haven't solved that problem. But by replacing the capacitors on the audio board, we've made it so that it's louder. So if you have a Game Gear of your own, or if you're planning on getting one, if you have no sound, just to show you the back of it again, and to show you the back on here, you're going to want to take out the board that has the headphones attached to it, which is this board here on the left hand side when you open it, which would be on the right hand side on the back. You want to take this out and you want to replace your capacitors on the board, and then you should get overall a much better sound out of it, a much louder sound. Likely the fuzziness that I was hearing was because of the fact that the speaker was actually doing real work this time. So that should be good. So the next step, which is in the next video, because I'm going to split this into two parts, I think, is basically us looking at getting the main board and replacing all the capacitors on there. And what I'm expecting to happen is that we at least get something better out of the screen than what we're getting right now, because at the moment we're just getting a black screen and lines, and I really want to be able to, you know, see the screen. So we'll get onto that in the next video, which should be pretty much uploaded right after this one. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Bye.